I'm so excited to introduce today's guest, Dr. Monisha Bhanote. Let me introduce her really quickly before I bring her on. Dr. Monisha Bhanote is a triple board certified physician with expertise in integrative medicine, internal medicine, and anatomic clinical pathology. Known as the health and wellness expert, she has been featured in publications such as Shape Magazine, Mind Body Green, Martha Stewart Living, Pop Sugar, Bustle, Health Central, Insider, Prevention Magazine, and Healthline, amongst others. She is an accomplished author, having written numerous medical articles in a medical textbook. She is a sought after health and wellness expert, providing both speaking and written commentary to multiple news media outlets and publications. Always fascinated by the human body, she has spent the last 2 decades studying how all systems in our body affect each other, both on a cellular and global level. She has additional training certification in culinary medicine, meditation, plant-based nutrition, and yoga medicine, which she utilizes to apply a whole body approach to healing. Her interests include nutrition and the microbiome, the role of stress and inflammation in disease manifestation, Ayurveda and its clinical applications, applying mindfulness as a lifestyle practice, cancer and disease prevention, and improving the health and well-being of individuals through practice, education, and research. She is definitely well trained, and I can't wait to talk to her about the connection between the foods we eat and our mental health. Hi, Dr. Bhanote. Thank you so much for joining us for this podcast episode. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you. I really look forward to talking to you today.
Well, I just shared a little bit about your very impressive background and your expertise. Can you tell me a little bit about what inspired you as a physician to become interested in holistic and integrative approach to healing? And then I say this because most medical professionals don't focus on nutrition and diet. And so what inspired you, and why did you go in that direction?
Yeah, so I've been in the healthcare field for over 2 decades, so over 20 years. And I feel like I've almost come full circle from where I've started, in a sense that I started in integrative, in internal medicine. And at that time, which was a very long time ago, I just felt that I wasn't able to provide the kind of care that my patients needed. And that might still be, a reality right now. But I think my own interest in learning about what else can we do, especially when it comes to prevention of disease, was really interesting to me, because I've diagnosed hundreds and thousands of cancers. And when you look at patients' charts, you're almost like, well, there is no discussion of what to do after you've had the surgery, or even what to do to prevent recurrence and of cancers. And to me, there's still a lot of space in there for where we can actually help our patients. So that's where I started doing a deep dive, I would say about maybe 10 years back, into what's going on in our body, what can we control and what can't we control.
Yeah, that is really interesting. A lot of people don't really think about the follow-up care and even what caused all of those issues to begin with, right? So today we're talking about mental health and the connection between food and mood. So anxiety is currently the #1 disorder in the world, right? And because of this pandemic, it's predicted to be significantly higher in the coming months. And mental illness in general is going to be probably the next pandemic, because of how everybody has been struggling the past year. And what role do you think diet plays in the significant rise in mental health in general, whether just in the United States or globally?
Yeah, so I think nutrition plays a very big impact here. And what I like to do for my clients and my patients that come in is really break it down into the factors that I think are neurotoxic versus neuroprotective when we're talking about foods. And when I say neurotoxic, there's clearly some foods and diet styles that have been shown to change the neurotransmitter levels and our gut microbiome. So I like to address those as in foods that may increase anxiety. and especially in people who might be more predisposed to anxiety. And then I also like to give them alternatives as to what are some of the more neuroprotective foods that can help raise some of our neurotransmitters, that such as serotonin, dopamine, GABA. I really like to look at things on more of a cellular perspective. So we look at where the individual is in the beginning, where are their nutrient values, where are their vitamin levels, where are their antioxidant levels, where are there maybe toxic element levels. So I do a very thorough examination up front to see what our starting point is. Then we look at things based on their lifestyle. So it's not just about the nutrition, it's also incorporating the lifestyle. And then we take it from there and kind of build up stepwise for them.
The majority of the world's population that's adopting the Western diet, they're seeing a lot of inflammation, a rise in a lot of disorders that we didn't really struggle with until we were much older. Like we're seeing a lot of kids with diabetes, with high blood pressure, with heart issues. So what role do you think the Western diet is playing in contributing to not only our physical illnesses, but also our mental health?
Yeah, so there's certain components in the what we call the standard American diet, and if you abbreviate it, it's actually called the SAD diet, which it is quite sad because it is implicated in essentially all of our chronic diseases, from heart disease to obesity to diabetes to cancer development. So with each of these diseases comes comorbidities, and with comorbidities comes increase for anxiety, depression, mental illness, and stuff like that. So there's when you look at the ingredients of what's in a Western diet, number one, we become deficient in what our cells actually need to function, is one factor. But then we have an overwhelming amount of inflammation due to the things we are putting in from that. So we're kind of losing a battle, like twice, I should say, because so for example, when we are thinking of a standard Western diet, we're thinking of highly saturated fats, trans fats, the unhealthy oils such as vegetable oil that's used for deep frying. We're thinking of high glycemic foods that increase our insulin release. We're thinking of sweetened drinks with high fructose corn syrup, red meat. So there is a number of factors when we're looking at the Western diet. So this kind of high fat, high carb diet not only changes the brain chemistry. So we have even seen in animal studies and in some human studies that it changes the brain chemistry so much that it's linked to anxiety. And the thought is that it most likely is related to decreases in perhaps maybe serotonin, which is one of our feel-good hormones. I think we're really in the early development of really knowing what is going on there, but there is an association, and I think this is where quite a bit of the research is now heading towards, because we've made some kind of link and we want to know more. And then when we talk about the link, we've also made the link where it comes to the gut microbiome. And in the gut microbiome, we can see that the gut microbiome in people who eat a standard American diet or a Western diet actually have a different gut microbiome than individuals who don't eat that kind of diet. And you can compare where the anxiety levels are, and there is a difference there. Mm-hmm. And I think now it's really isolating which bacteria are in there that are really making the difference, and how do we get that bacteria. I think overall the big picture is, yes, we know how to get it, but now, the research is going into how do we really, really get it. So.
Well, I notice a huge difference with my patients when they, the ones that actually take on my suggestions of changing their diet and improving their gut health and making those changes the significant change between one session, like our sessions are weekly. So if they have an appointment this week, they come back next week and they see a significant change just by eating better and changing their diet and not having that standard American diet and increasing the nutrients that they need. But the gut plays a huge role. I mean, a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists in the field, and then the research is showing that the gut bacteria plays a more important role than once believed. And so they're calling them psychobiotics because of how important they are. And I like to look at it as like a village. And if the village is not healthy, it doesn't matter which bacteria lives there. And it's like there's the diversity of trillions of different types in there. So can you speak a little bit about that? Because I don't think people understand the role the gut bacteria plays. And I think it's important for physical as well as mental health, right?
Absolutely. I mean, when you're thinking about the bacteria in our gut, I mean, these are trillions and trillions of little guys. And like you said, you can consider it like a village. And you want a village that is, going to basically make your body work more efficiently, move better, feel better, sleep better. And part of the way to do that is to adopt a certain habit of eating certain foods. So it's not a specific food, it's more of eating a cleaner diet, a whole foods diet, more nutrients. That will actually change the bacteria. So if you eat a very Western style diet, of a lot of, if you're eating a burger a day, a fast food, even French fries, because they're fried in the poorer quality oils, such as vegetable oils. And I know the word vegetable is in there, but that oil is actually not, it's inflammatory for you. So when you do that, you increase the bacteria that's associated with that kind of food. And that bacteria continues to grow. And it crowds out the good bacteria that you want. So when it starts to crowd out that bacteria, other changes can happen in your GI tract. So that's where we come into, our GI tract is lined by epithelium, and that epithelium is the barrier between the nutrients that are going through our tubular structure of our bowel and entering the rest of the body. So it allows certain nutrients back and forth, and we really want to take the nutrients in that need to go to the rest of our body. But when you are disrupting that barrier, you're actually creating spaces in there, which some people call leaky gut, which now you're getting stuff entering into your body that really isn't going to do anything to it. Also, when you're eating a Western standard diet, you are decreasing the neurotransmitters that you need for your mood. For example, we know that serotonin, 90% of serotonin is made in our gut. So when you are not supplying it with the foods that are precursors to serotonin, you're not able to make that. Also, 50% of GABA is made in the gut. So these are the kinds of things when I sit down and, like you said, you see a difference in people pretty significantly right away when they start eating better. It's because they're able to change their microbiome. They're able to change how they are sending these signals and these messages from the food they eat in their gut, the gut to their brain. I mean, it's a bidirectional pathway. So you can actually change the signaling and the messages that you're sending.
Yeah, that connection is really important. But also you specialize with cancer and you treat cancer patients. And I know that the bad bacteria love the junk food, right? They love the sugar, and the sugar also feeds the cancer cells. And so we're doing ourselves a favor when we're increasing the good bacteria because it's protective for our health and our body, but also in reduction of cancer and other disorders as well. What have you found in connection to cancer and other physical illnesses or long-term, like lupus and fibromyalgia? What's the connection to that? Have you found anything?
Well, from what I've seen with my patients, I find that when we really delve into their diets prior to their diagnosis, their diets are the standard Western diet, and they actually, many of my clients did not even realize that there was an impact of their diet in how it created inflammation in their body and how it might have been one of the contributing factors. It's not the only one, but it certainly plays a role. And then when we sit down and discuss what are the foods that your body actually needs to make your cellular processes work, they're like, oh, I've never even eaten that before. And then when we look at what nutrients that they are deficient in, and we're talking about basic nutrients that make a reaction go from producing one thing to another thing. So we're talking like on a cellular level, you need magnesium, you need zinc, you need these cofactors. When they're not even incorporating these because they didn't even know. Most of my patients are ready to really jump on that. Oh, wow. Okay, now I need to make sure that I'm getting this so my body can function, because technically we are all making cancerous cells every day. It's part of our process, but our body is able to kill off these cells in a process. But you need the right factors to make this happen. So I think that's where that information is lacking, is that they're not sure where to start and what actually is important.
Yeah, it's the connection between cancer cells, like you said, is they don't even realize. And I know that it's hard to change your diet. I totally get it. A lot of my patients really struggle. And I remember when I became a vegetarian at 18, and I was a terrible vegetarian. I didn't eat vegetables. I had a lot of carbs. I thought I could eat all the pizza I wanted, all the, whatever that as long as it was not meat. But I wasn't getting the nutrients. And so that's saying that we're well fed, but we're starving.
Yes.
Really is true for the Western population, because we might be feeding ourselves, but our cells and our gut bacteria are not getting the nutrients that they need. And that is going to create a lot of different problems for us physically.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, like I've already mentioned, so you have neurotoxic foods, right? So we're definitely talking about the standard Western diet. Other things to consider that can be neurotoxic is caffeine. Now, caffeine has its place, and you definitely want to be at a certain level. But once you go above a certain level of caffeine, then you can actually increase your anxiety. So many studies say that under 400 milligrams a day is a safe value. If you think about maybe a regular cup of coffee, that's about 100 milligrams. I think an espresso, which I drink, is about 70 to 80 milligrams. But now when you're talking about your Starbucks that you're drinking, we're already getting into the 500 milligrams of, way above what our body should have. Now, caffeine is metabolized differently in each individual based on how they can metabolize it. But I think, people need to look at really everything they're putting into their body and what it actually does for you. And I think we need to be a little bit more mindful and purposeful of how we are approaching our relationship with food. Because, we've become so, like you said, we have access to so much. And instead of taking food for what it is, to provide us the nutrients we need to have a strong, healthy body and mind, we've kind of taken advantage of it and like in a way. So, definitely the standard Western diet. Alcohol is another thing that, we think, let's have that drink, it'll make us relax at night, but then that's disrupting certain hormones in our body and really leading to poor sleep quality. All of our artificial sweeteners, we think, all right, well, we don't want the calories to gain weight, so let me just do a diet drink. Well, there's, increased association with artificial sweeteners and mental health. So I believe it's aspartame that's been most studied. But so when we're looking at it, we're really looking at, all right, what are the big culprits we want to take out? But then also, what are the things that we want to add in? What are these neuroprotective foods? Because for my patients, you don't want to feel like there's a lack of something. It's more of we actually have an abundance of something. They just don't know what this abundance is. And when we've started incorporating, certain meal plans and certain foods, like you said, you're seeing patients 1 week later, but I'm seeing them, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks later. And they come back to me and they're like, Dr. Bhanote, I slept better. I had more energy in the morning. I mean, the impact is really quite powerful.
It feels so good to hear people say that, like when they just all of a sudden the light bulb goes off and they're like, I feel so good and I never thought I could.
Yeah.
But like I was mentioning with my being a vegetarian, when people would tell me, hey, you're not getting enough protein, like I was the type that if I had eggs once a week, I thought I was doing a good thing. And so when they're like, you're eating way too many carbs, you're not getting enough protein, I was so addicted to the carbs that the idea of giving it up would freak me out. And so I resisted and resisted to the point that I ended up getting insulin resistance. For a lot of my patients, I totally get it. They're addicted to the fast food that they're eating or the diet sodas that they're drinking, and they're having a really hard time letting that go and not realizing that that's exactly what's making them feel so awful. So how can people overcome these addictions? How have you helped your patients overcome the addiction? Because it's not that a lot of people know what they should eat. They just either can't because they're addicted or whatever.
No, you're right. I mean, it is a bit of an addiction. It is there, it's changing our habits. And unfortunately, I find that people kind of wait until they've developed a disease or they've developed cancer, or they've developed, high blood pressure, and then their doctor wants to put them on meds, or they're now obese. I find that people often wait that long, and that's really what then becomes a motivator for change. But really, we should be doing it a lot earlier. So what I do with my patients is we really break it down and work in small bits. So we start with what is going to be more impactful for them and kind of build up on that. Because once they see a small change, then they're like, okay, doc, what can I do next? So, it varies individual to individual. Some people, we start with just changing your breakfast, changing what you're eating for breakfast. And then maybe a month later, we might start with lunch. So it's really having these small changes build up. Some people, we start with exercise. I mean, it really depends on the individual. But when it comes to nutrients, explaining to them that, all right, these are the foods that are going to supply you with your magnesium, or these are the omega-3 rich foods, which are anti-inflammatory. Let's try incorporating these slowly. The whole thing is to, like I said, not to feel like you have a lack of something, but more that you have an abundance of food, because there really is so many options when you look at it. What I like to do is give them the options more to start adding in first, and slowly your taste buds will also change. So then, for me, I know I haven't been plant-based or vegan my entire life. I transitioned from eating everything to pescatarian to vegetarian to vegan, and I did it over time. It was, a progressive progress, but it was more as I learned more and more about each of the, when you see cancer in 18-year-olds, when you're seeing cancer in all these young people, like in your own thing, you're going, wait a minute, something has to change. So I know for myself, I have made major changes from what I learned in medical school to what I'm doing now. There has been a drastic evolvement in the information we have in the last 20 years. So I've applied all those changes to my life in the hopes to prevent many of these chronic illnesses. And I personally have seen changes in my energy, changes in my mood. And I will even test it out in a sense that, if I do eat something that's, processed, I instantly can see the next morning that I'm lethargic, so you can test it out with yourself and see. It actually, when you become more mindful of it, you realize, whoa, what's going on here? I mean, that afternoon 3:00 snack habit, I know many of my colleagues have, because we all meet at 3:00 to have our little pick me up. And then 1 hour later, you're crashing even worse, because now you've eaten whatever's in the doctor's lounge, which could be, between coffee, cookies, crackers, all this stuff. So I think then the question becomes, like, patients want to know, well, what can I do to relieve anxiety? What can I start adding in?
Yeah, that feeling of, like you said, your taste buds do change. When I cleaned up my diet and I reduced sugar significantly, things that used to not bother me, like ice cream or cake, now when I have it, I get an instant headache and I don't feel good afterwards. So then after a while, like I used to drink soda and I'd bounce off the walls for hours and I couldn't sleep at night. And I said, it's not worth it anymore. I don't want to feel like this. And so that inspired me to give it up. And I haven't looked back since. And I haven't had soda in like 20 years. But I think it's just a matter of, like you said, once you experience feeling good, it's just not worth it to make yourself feel so bad with junk food.
No, I agree. I think anxiety has become such a norm for people that we've forgotten what it feels like to feel good, right? It's just become acceptable. Oh, everybody has anxiety. Everybody gets stressed. We live in a very stressful world. Just, suck it up. But it really doesn't need to be that way. I mean, of course, it's all individual based, but I think we're accepting something just because it's so present, but that doesn't need to be the case, is what I'm saying.
Good point. And like you said, just because it's normal doesn't mean it's okay. It's like you can change that. Oh, considering that anxiety is the #1 disorder, a lot of people are struggling with it, but just not realizing that they can change it and do something about it. But also this pandemic, like I said, a lot of people are predicting that this will I've read a lot of articles recently that the mental illness is going to be the next pandemic. It is going to hit us globally because so many people are struggling. The mental health professionals are burnt out. The medical professionals are burnt out, but also the people that have been struggling the past year are burnt out. But what role do you think the pandemic has played in the increase in anxiety, and then also how we've been eating the past year?
Yeah, I think about this often. I'm actually, quite concerned about this year because I'm seeing two kinds of patients. Ones that have just been, all right, the pandemic has really, been awful for them. They have not exercised. They're just eating whatever they have access to. They've taken this as, a real downturn. And then I'm seeing patients, on the other hand, who've used it as an opportunity to get out there, exercise more, change their eating habits, learn how to cook at home. I'm really concerned for the ones who did not go down that path, because with our increase in mental illness, it's also going to become an increase in the obesity rates that we're seeing, the increase in our chronic illnesses. And I'm also concerned that we're going to see an increase in cancer over the next few years because of this pandemic. It's not easy, how we manage stress. And I think having that information out there in all different ways, because not everybody's going to respond to stress the same way, but really, educating and offering support in any way we can is really going to be important. And like you said, I'm very concerned of what's coming. I do think that there's going to be an increased rate of cancer for sure, no doubt.
Yeah, I think we're going to feel the effects of this pandemic for decades to come, unfortunately. You did mention just changing breakfast. And for a lot of my patients, I also say that try the 80-20 rule for now. Just make your breakfast and your lunch automatic and change that. And then you can be varied in your dinner. But what are some recommendations that you have as far as what should they eat for breakfast? What are some typical good things that they can start their breakfast with? And then also their lunch, like just if you can just give us some ideas of what people should be considering adding to their diet.
Yeah, so definitely I would start first with some of what are the key ingredients, right? So some of those neuroprotective factors that I was talking about. So before I go into examples of breakfast, lunch, dinner, I think let's just mention some of the basics. So omega-3 rich foods. So when I'm talking about omega-3 omega-3 foods, I'm thinking of things like avocados, which have the good fats, olive oils as opposed to vegetable oils. For the people who are not completely plant-based, they might incorporate cold water fish like salmon, really getting some high quality omega-3 in there. You can also consider adding flax seeds or hemp seeds. Nuts are a good source of omega-3s. That will also, because omega-3s are anti-inflammatory and our standard Western diet is pro-inflammatory, omega-6 high, it can help decrease that ratio that we have. We actually want a ratio of 4-to-1 when it comes to omega-6 to omega-3, where our standard American diet, our SAD diet, can be anywhere from 20-to-1 to 10-to-1. We know that as we increase omega-3 levels from the food, that we also decrease those inflammatory levels, and that specifically through interleukins. So interleukin 6 can be decreased when we're increasing omega-3. The other thing, as for food groups, I like to always incorporate fermented foods. Fermented foods can obviously, if you don't know, supply you with a source of good bacteria. So when we go back to that gut microbiome, and there's different variety of fermented foods to choose from. So if you're like, I don't like sauerkraut, which is a fermented food, or you don't like kimchi, which is also a fermented food, you can try kombucha, which is a fermented drink. Of course, you want one that's low in sugar. You can also try pickling your own vegetables. I have a great recipe where, I pickle whatever vegetables or pickled onions and add them on. Also fermented foods, so a yogurt or a kefir with live cultures to add in that good bacteria. That's a good source. I think also being cognizant of the other factors such as magnesium. So magnesium-rich foods, chickpeas are actually very high in magnesium. Leafy greens, dark leafy greens. Other legumes, even peanut butter is a good source. So increasing that, I think. Also adding serotonin-rich foods. Now, there's no food that really has serotonin, but you can add the precursors to that. So you might want to start adding more of those tryptophan-rich foods. So I'm not saying to go have a Thanksgiving turkey dinner every night, but definitely more of those leafy greens, more of those legumes, that kind of stuff. So really eating more in a nutrient rich plan as opposed to a nutrient deficient plan would be a start. And then as for, if you eat breakfast, the choices that I usually work with is, first of all, what do my clients like, right? So if they eat, for example, they eat toast every morning, we might get a toast or bread that has more of a whole grain component with a lower glycemic index, so it doesn't make their sugar jump. So instead of putting on their toast butter, we might say, all right, let's add some avocados to add that good fat, or let's add some almond butter to add that good fat. So it really depends on the individual and what they're already eating. And then I like to modify from there. So then, for example, if you already eat a salad for lunch, well, you can take that iceberg lettuce and instead replace it with a variety of greens. So a nice mixture of kale, nice spinach, Swiss chard, dark leafy greens. The more variety you add to your meals, the more biodiverse your gut microbiome will become. So you really want to eat a rainbow of food. So like I said, we're really working off of where the person's starting point is and then adding in. And then we also like to add in, I find a lot of people with anxiety issues are also low in B levels and vitamin B levels. So I might add in sprinkling on some nutritional yeast into some of their foods to kind of give them a source of vitamin B. So really, there's so many options out there, I think, that there is something that I think people will be like, oh, I can do that, you know. I think part of it is working with their provider, somebody who's familiar with different foods and also familiar with where their body is starting at.
Those are some really good recommendations. I know that obviously you can't give every single ingredient or that they need to use, but those are a good place to get started. A lot of us are magnesium deficient currently because the soil has been tampered with and we're not getting as much magnesium from our foods that used to be magnesium rich foods. So do you recommend supplements at all that people can add to their diet because their diet is either lacking or their food doesn't have the nutrients that it needs?
Yeah. So I definitely do. My disclaimer prior to telling you about supplements is you should always get your supplements from discussing it with your healthcare provider. The worst thing I see is people, you know, going into the local drugstore or wherever and just picking up bottles and not really getting high quality pharmaceutical grade, and they're on 20 supplements and their levels still aren't normal. So because I work with individuals where I'm actually checking their levels prior to or during the time we're working together to supplement, we really fine tune that. I find that most people at minimum need a high quality multivitamin. Then the second item we do is a high quality omega-3, both options for vegan and non-vegan. And then the third one usually is a high quality vitamin D. As we know, a lot of people are vitamin D deficient. And I think even this year, with a lot of people staying indoors even more, there's probably a high probability that you've become even more deficient. So I think having a very high quality vitamin D would be important. And then the other thing to realize with supplements is that they're not a replacement for eating food. They are exactly what they're called, a supplement. So they're in addition to. I always like to give the analogy of a Christmas tree, right? So if you are a Christmas tree and you know your branches are nice, bright green, smelling great, firm, that's coming from all the nutrients and food you put in your body. The supplements are the little ornaments that you're putting on top of it, right? So you want to make sure that your tree is solid to begin with. And really that's starting with food.
I love that analogy. I'm going to use that because it is important, like you said, but some people just think they can make up a unhealthy lifestyle by just taking a bunch of pills or supplements, and it's not going to really work. But I also recommend food-based multivitamin, something that's made with food, sweetened with food, and dyed with food, because there are so many synthetic ones out there that our body doesn't really recognize as
Absolutely.
nutritious.
And that's the thing, like I was saying, of buying them at the, you know, the local drugstore is you don't know really the quality of them. And I know, like my patients will tell you, I have them bring all their supplements into my office. We line them all up on my desk. And like, there can be 20 supplements there that they've been taking over time. And we basically knock them all off my desk and start with 3. And because the quality of the fillers and the actual levels that, you know, it's hard enough taking 1 or 2 pills, and now you're taking 20 bottles worth where the levels aren't going to get you to where you need to be. To me is one, a waste of money, right? And a waste of your own energy. So supplements are $1 billion industry, right? Mm-hmm. But you don't know if you're getting the ones, first of all, that your body can metabolize and absorb. The other thing about supplements when I work with my patients is we break down when to have them, during what time of the day, with what meal, with food, without food, what food will help them absorb it even more, right? So, for example, vitamin D, you want to have with fat-rich foods to help you absorb that even more, because it's a fat-soluble vitamin. Vitamin B, for example, any of the vitamin Bs, some patients like to take their vitamins in the evening. Well, if you go take your vitamin Bs in the evening, you're going to be wired all night, because that's going to give you so much energy. So there is a lot of fine tuning that goes on. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, with people who don't work with a provider who's familiar with that and how to fine tune that, it can be that, years of, I don't know what's going on. And the doctor said, but I don't feel right. Right. So.
Yeah, and I'm taking all these vitamins and it's not making a big difference in my life and I'm wasting all this money. And so people give up on it instead of actually working with a practitioner and learning how to use their supplements correctly. And just because something is natural doesn't mean it's always safe either. So really make sure that you're working with somebody that can help you, guide you in that direction. I just want to have one last question for you. Given that all this life experience you've accumulated over the years, just looking back now, what would you go back and tell your younger self about what you wish you knew back then?
Gosh, I wish I knew what I know now, really. I mean, I will tell you, I grew up eating the standard American diet, outside of home. At home, obviously, my mom is a great cook, and we ate home cooked meals. But after going off to school after 18 and being out of the house since I was 18, I do cook at home, but I think I didn't consciously make that connection, even though I was trained to know about it, how the actual disease evolves over time, right? So when my job essentially has been for the last 2 decades holding people's organs in my hand and holding their disease states, and knowing that we can prevent a lot of this. To me, it's like, I wish I would have started in my own journey of really making those changes early on. I definitely made them at a prime time, but I really wish I was doing them in my 20s. I think that's what I would tell myself. I think it would have made it easier for me to have those long days of studying through medical school. I think it would have made a lot of difference in a lot of things, instead of staying up late nights and ordering whatever the dorm room will have delivered. And I definitely think it would have made a difference.
Those are good points, because a lot of kids don't think, or they think, oh, I'm still young, I can eat whatever I want. But now that we're seeing so many young kids having all these adult disorders like diabetes and heart disease and high blood pressure and obesity, we need to start at a much younger age. So those are really good points you made.
I think we need to start in the home. That's really where we need to start, in the home, as we're raising our children. I mean, I have colleagues, doctor parents, double doctor households, parents that I know, and they're like, well, my kid won't eat, so I'll just give him whatever he wants. So that might be goldfish crackers every evening just to get him to eat. And it kind of makes me cringe, because, all right, he likes goldfish crackers. So what's a close enough alternative, or how can we kind of make this work? It's definitely not easy, I would say, but it's doable. It's doable.
Like you said, we as parents are giving those kids that. They wouldn't have access to goldfish crackers if we didn't give them. And of course, kids will want ice cream over real food. Kids will want junk food over healthy food. But we're teaching them to want those things instead of actually teaching them to eat healthy foods. One thing that I'm so grateful for is I grew up in Afghanistan. I was a young kid, and I loved my vegetable garden that we had in our backyard. And I would not only sit there with a hose and a salt shaker and just wash the vegetables and eat right there. I would make these beautiful baskets for my teachers, and I'd take it to them. But that's how I grew up. And my mom refused to let us eat outside that much. I mean, we would get maybe McDonald's ice cream once a year. And as much as we later on, as I became a teenager and I started eating a lot of junk food, at that time we were rebelling against. We didn't really agree with the fact that she was limiting what we wanted to eat, but that really set up my taste buds for wanting to eat healthier foods later on, even though I did have a little period of eating the junk foods and dabbling in the standard American diet for a while.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, my culture is the same. I mean, I grew up eating Indian food, home cooked for my mom, and that's where I've learned all my Indian cooking from. And my taste buds definitely went through that time of, eating Doritos after school. And gosh, I can't even imagine eating that now. But I think now it's a matter of going back to realizing what makes your body feel good. And my taste buds right now, I can taste, I've eaten salad, like say at the hospital salad bar, and it had pesticides on it. I mean, my taste buds right now are so fine tuned into being aware of chemicals. I actually started growing my own greens during the pandemic using a hydroponic plant stand, just to have access to as much greens as I could, because I can taste it. So, like when you're eating live food, it tastes so much better. It tastes so different, and you feel so energized, and your mind feels so clear.
And when you clean your taste buds and, like you said, fine tune your taste buds, a piece of fruit can feel so delicious. A piece of, even vegetables can feel so good and they taste so good because your taste buds are able to actually taste them, and they're not numbed by all the processed and sugary foods, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Your taste buds change. I mean, you actually start craving fruit. Like there's certain fruits that I crave. I'm like, oh, I want that right now. And I think even for when it comes to vegetables, we can actually increase eating our vegetables, in the sense, like when we think of like a red pepper, for example, we think of a red pepper maybe sliced for a salad, or we think of it maybe for dinner, put into a stir fry. I remember when I started eating red peppers as if they were an apple. Just wash a red pepper, pick it up and start eating it. And that didn't come to me until I think I was traveling somewhere in a foreign country, and I saw somebody doing that, and I'm like, well, that's convenient. Why don't I do that? And I think it's just a matter of realizing we have access to this, and how do we incorporate it, because you don't need to make it difficult, right? So if you're used to throwing in an apple into the school lunchbox every day, throw in a red pepper. It's pretty sweet if you get a good quality one, and that's the easy way to start adding more vegetables. I think we try and make things more complex, as I don't have time to prepare all this food. I don't have time to meal plan. Eat the food as is. Like bring an avocado for lunch, and you can slice it up right then and there and put some salt and pepper on it. There you go. I think we're trying to make it more complicated than it is.
Yeah, just the fruits as they are, they're just delicious. But with the bell pepper, I would say take out the seeds if you're giving it to kids, because
Yeah.
slice that up a little bit.
Or don't eat the core.
Right, right. It's just a matter of teaching kids how to eat those things. Kids used to make fun of my daughter because she would take persimmons to school, and they're like, "Why are you bringing a tomato to school?" Because they've never seen a persimmon before.
Well, when persimmon season is around, oh my God, I can eat a persimmon or two a day when it's in season.
I go crazy. I go and buy them.
A farm about a hour from here that has organic persimmons. I think I bought, I don't know, I think it must have been like 15 pounds worth of persimmons when I went out there, and I just ate them for a month. It was great.
I love them so much. I love the little crunch you get, the sweetness. It's not too sweet, but I'm also obsessed with pomegranates. When it's pomegranate season, I'm getting them by the 20, 30 pounds at a time.
And all the nutrients in all of these foods. I mean, I don't even think we know all the nutrients, but when you're just looking at big level phytonutrients, antioxidants, that's so important.
Yeah, I just want people to really go back to nature. I mean, in a lot of ways, like you said, people are growing their own vegetables, they're growing their own gardens. I'm even like, go grow your own livestock if you can. If you can have like a cow that you can get fresh milk from, or fresh goat milk from, or even finding a farm that families can go together and buy organic pasture raised meat. Just buy a cow and split it up amongst families. That makes such a difference than the conventional meat that people that are using and buying. So all these little steps do make a difference. And I know that initially it can be hard. Like I recently, like the past couple of years, really started prioritizing my gut and learning how to eat sauerkraut, which I love, jicama, Jerusalem artichokes, beets, radishes, all of those, because my gut really craves that. That's their food and I want to give it to them. But it was not easy at first. I didn't know exactly what they were. I was kind of hesitant at first, but now I love them all.
Yeah, I think like I see with my patients that have grown, and I have patients of all different ages, from 18 all the way up to 80. But I see that when I ask them to, go try these foods, they come back, they're like, wow, that tasted really good. Part of my visits actually involve going to the grocery store with them so they know how to navigate a grocery store, because we're so used to going and picking up our Franken foods that are, stick in the microwave and heat up, and we've got a TV dinner ready for us. And I think once they start tasting those, they're like, oh, I've never tasted a mandarin that tastes good. To me, it's just so interesting that we've gone through adulthood in a sense where we don't even know what we're putting into our body. And it's quite sad that people don't realize that until now they've developed, all these diseases that they're like, well, I think, now I want to make sure I'm healthy after the disease has developed, where we can actually prevent a lot of this. And I think that should be really the focus, is teaching it early on, making these choices and making it accessible across the country. There's the middle of the country. I know when I was driving cross country, they don't even have access to a lot of this stuff. And that makes it challenging. So I think it's educating on not only what is necessary, but also making it available for people.
You can either pay the doctor later or you can pay the farmer now, because a lot of people say it's too expensive, I can't afford it. But I've literally sat down with my patient and I said, okay, even if you're spending $5 a day, 5 days a week on lunch, that's going very minimum. And I know a lot of people spend way more than that. If you add all that up, that's a lot of money that you can use towards organic foods or vegetables or foods that you can make at home, or even buying a rotisserie chicken and cutting that up and making a salad and taking that to work instead of going and getting processed foods. All these little changes, it seems expensive at first, even when you're getting your vitamins and supplements at first. But over time, you're going to feel better. You're going to be more productive. You're going to have more energy, and it becomes worth it. And you're not wasting as much time as you were because of your diet and lifestyle, right?
Well, no, you're absolutely right. That's a great point. I think you can actually get an organic bag, like salad bag, for $2 now for already pre-cut organic salad. You can find that for like $2.50, and having that every day, whether it's for a family, a couple of those bags a week, if it's for a family of 4, is still going to provide you a lot of nutrients, and it doesn't need to cost that much. Having lentils, beans, vegetables, you can even, between the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15, decide which ones you really need to do organic and which ones you don't. You can grow some stuff at home. I know sprouts is a big thing. I grow my own sprouts at home, and sprouts, I eat them because they're highly nutrient dense. They just have a very concentrated amount of nutrients. But if you go to the store and buy sprouts, well, they can be anywhere from $7 to $12 for one little container, where meanwhile I can make them at home, and it'll cost me that same amount will cost me $1. So it's a matter of understanding, preparing, and like you said, in the long term, you make the investment early on. You get that lifestyle down, whether it's, a year working with a doctor, and that's usually what I do with my patients. I work with them over, 6 to 8 months to a year. And those changes will give you 20 years. That will save you in the long run of having to go into the hospital, taking time off of work to care for yourself when you're sick, care for family members when they're sick, the amount of stress when it comes to going in and out of doctor's offices, the decreased productivity at work because you can't focus, because you're now dealing with, these health issues. It'll catch up to you one way or later. So you either decide to do it early on or you wait. It's the individual's choice. But I think, being that I see that we can do a lot in the preventative aspect, I do believe that there's a role there.
Yeah, such good information. And I know we could probably talk for hours about this, because this is something that I think we need to continue to talk about and educate people, because people might think it's too difficult, it's too expensive, it's too time consuming, but it doesn't have to be that way. So thank you for all that information. And I want to be mindful of your time. So I would love for us to continue to talk maybe in the future and bring you back on. But in the meantime, where can people find you?
Thank you. I really enjoyed our talk today, and definitely, I didn't even get into Ayurveda and its role with nutrition and what happens with anxiety. So I'd love to talk to you more about this. I can be reached at my website is www.drbhanote.com, and I can be on social media at Dr. Bhanote. You can find me there. And yeah, I'm pretty accessible.
Yeah, I would love to learn more about the Ayurvedic aspect of treatment. And I know that that's a whole nother way of looking at things. And there's constitutions and what's warming foods and cold foods and all of that. So we'll definitely get into that hopefully in the future.
That's its whole separate talk for sure. But there's definitely a correlation, especially when it comes to the gut and foods. So it's quite impressive that a century or like 5,000-year-old system kind of knew before we did, so we're just catching up.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would love to have that conversation. So again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to talking to you in the future.
Thank you.